This is a tier 100 Nightmare Dungeon, and this is the new Tempest Storm Necro that's now using the Ring of the Sacrilegious Soul paired together with Ixfeld's Corroded Signet, and you're also having Lidless Wall to, well, create infinite bone storms that you essentially can just zoom through everything. And the crazy part is just the amount of... There was there a 14 million damage hit? Oh yeah, everything is dead. Okay, on we go. The crazy damage we're actually dealing, it is quite incredible, and you're not really actually playing something Infinimist style. You're rather just, yeah, having your bone storms tear everything apart, and due to your dashes actually reducing your cooldowns, you more or less permanently have it up, and well, your 17,000 barriers going. Oh yeah, that's already the end of the dungeon. Now you would say, but Pony, the single boss target damage isn't that horrible with this build? No, we actually fixed that, because now with the Ixfeld's Corroded Signet and, well, obviously the multitude of explosions you have going on, plus the Ring of Sacrilegious Soul, you are just absolutely melting a boss. And that is even without running any kind of potion here right now to increase your lucky hit chance. I mean, that's it. That was a tier 100 Nightmare Dungeon. Now, I know what you're thinking. If it's that good at tier 100 Nightmare Dungeons, it must be horrible at Uber Lilith, right? But the reality looks quite different. You get your Bone Storm up, you spam that on her, you make some corpses to have it explode. Millions of crits are ramping up. There's triple Bone Storm happening right now. Bones are just slapping her into the face, and that is her gone. Phase 1 over. And same goes for phase 2. The only problem here is that your initial damage is not so high, so you actually have to go through one phase of these annoying fireballs. But once you understood how these work, right, you're okay off against them, even as a Necro who's essentially lacking any kind of cool survival skill to usually go through this. But yeah, we can fix this, and then we can have it stunned so it just dies away here right now, as you can see. That's it. That's Lilith. I will obviously have to dodge the fireballs, but yeah, I guess you understand how simple this actually is. Now we're running. Go Blood Mist so we don't die. All of this going on. Now it pumps out even more of these fire things, which can be annoying. Gotta put some things on her, get a dash back. We go around, get out, go out. Throw 1, 2, and then go into Blood Mist so she doesn't kill you with her weird ass thingy. And you're done. That's it. It's Uber Lilith 2. Now, obviously, if you get some lucky hits, you can skip the whole complete phase 2. Now, the build plays vastly different to Infinimist, and also for bosses, and especially Uber Lilith, there's a little something you can do to make it even more efficient. I'll tell you at the end of the video. We don't, for example, use a Reap at all. We'd rather use a Blight, because Blight also gives us 15% multiplicative damage to all our damage. Yeah. And on top of that, the initial hit can crit, as we're having good crits, plus the damage over time, and the hit can trigger Ixfeld's. We get Huge Flash, very good, followed up by Corpse Explosion into the Blighted Corpse Explosion, put 5 points in here, put also 5 points into the Blood Mist so that we do actually have the cooldown running, and the Ghastly Blood Mist for the corpses, but we're not playing the Corpse Explosion boots because we have the Ring of the Sacrilegious Soul. Huge Flash for the bonus damage, the same goes to the damage reduction and the bonus damage from close, as we're always close, as you have seen, plus the cooldown reduction from Abhorring Decrepify to get everything back faster. Now we're using Blighted Corpse Tendrils for Blood Orbs to just have a little bit source of bonus healing because it simply doesn't hurt. We don't need the Vulnerable because we have Metamorphosis, and then we get bonus movement speed, damage. Here, a little trick. This is only 1 point, but if you're actually fighting against Uber Lilith, that's a little heads up already. Put 2 points out of Blind and put 2 points into Reaper's Pursuit to just move a little bit faster. In general, you could also put the 2 points out of Blind and the 2 points into Reaper's Pursuit, because Blind itself is just very good as an essence spender that helps us to stack even more Shadow Blights, and the movement speed just makes it faster in dungeons. Now we have Bone Storm running with the bonus crit chance, and due to the Lidless Wall, we have it constantly running, and then obviously stand alone into Memento Mori for the bonus sacrifice bonuses into the Shadow Blight key passive. newly buffed, still doing even more bonus damage. Now, gear and aspects play close attention. We obviously have a bunch of uniques running, but I will also provide a link in the description below to a version of this build without a single unique. So you have something to play until you acquire the items. Key part is the Lidless Wall. Gives you life, essence, chance to restore essence, and the attack speed shall not be underestimated. No worries if you have a 5% roll or a 25% roll, they're all good. This allows you to have permanent Bone Storm running whenever you do damage outside of a Bone Storm. So even if the Bone Storm is off you, but one is running on the map, you can make even more. And if you pair the Lidless Wall together with the Metamorphosis Vampiric Power, then dashing through enemies makes your Bone Storm on you vanish, but you can still apply it. So fighting a boss means make Bone Storm on yourself, dash through him, apply Bone Storm. Done. That's simple. Now the super damage comes from Ixfeld's Corroded Signet. Has damage over time, super low roll here for me, lucky hit chance, cooldown reduction, and your damage over time effects have up to a 50% chance to erupt, dealing 41,000 damage of the same time to nearby enemies. Same type, very interesting here because if it's shadow damage and we're boosting shadow damage with the darkness glyph, even more damage. Lucky hit, super important to have this trigger, but this means that all your Bone Storms that now do shadow damage over time with the aspect of the ultimate shadows have a chance to trigger this for an explosion. And Bone Storm has a great lucky hit chance base already, and it's getting another 9% plus. The crazy part is the 41,000 damage that gets higher also when you're using the Blighted Amulet. Because here we're talking about 180% multiplicative damage plus when Shadow Blight key passive stacks up 10 times, which also applies to the explosion of the Ixfelds, making it just randomly proc 5 million, 8 million. I think 14 million is the highest I've seen so far. Now, very important on the amulet is Bloom passive. Bloom passive way too good because this gives you 6% increased damage, but 3 times. So it goes up to 18%. Now, if you get 3 more ranks into it, it's 12 instead of 6. So that goes from 12, 24, 36%, another 18% multiplicative bonus. I'm also taking all ranks to corpse skills, which makes your corpse explosion do another 40% multiplicative more damage. Total armor and shadow damage over time. This is actually the perfect amulet. It doesn't go better. There's nothing I would wish for on this amulet. Then the helmet took me so long to find. You want a total armor percentage roll, maximum life, and you see this is very bad. And then you do actually want dexterity on it. Yep, because that's bonus critical strike chance. Now, instead of the cooldown reduction, you could also take any resistance stat that you're lacking to max out your resistances. Because the cooldown reduction is getting taken care of by Flicker Stab, which gives us all stats, also more crit, armor, damage, essence. Movement speed extremely important. You need boots with movement speed. Also 80% ultimate skill damage, which makes our Bone Storm even more dangerous. And then we get the cooldown reduction as we dash through enemies. And you saw in the tier 100 gameplay where we're just flying through the dungeon. That's what we're essentially doing the whole time. Now on our wand, and wand is very important because we want the intrinsic lucky hit chance stat. We're looking for aspect of the grasping veins. For the bonus critical strike chance, 20% from Bone Storm, 20% from this, 20 to 30% from yourself, permanent crits with Ixfelds, permanent millions of damage. Here we're looking for damage to shadow damage affected over time, damage over time, intelligence would be good, and critical strike damage is really what you would like to have. Or skill damage works on the Blight, but preferable damage versus slowed rather. As the Panzer were running T-Bolt's Will, and due to the Metamorphosis power, constantly active. Problem here is it doesn't give us any life, but damage reduction and 20% all damage plus is nice, plus the 40% multiplicative damage as we're unstoppable, which we are in every dash. The 50 primary resource you gain back is spam your Blight, dash, spam your Blight. More chances for Ixfelds again, more chances for crits, get the Shadow Blight stacked up, and while you're actually spamming Blight, and that's the interesting part, you make damage over time work, right? But your Ring of the Sacrilegious Soul that you're having, and here we're looking for a perfect roll, permanently triggers Corpse Explosion and Corpse Tendrils. So you're doing one source of damage with your core skill, while doing another source of damage with your ring at the same time, which also gives you ranks on all corpse skills for even more multipliers, maximum life, and very important lucky hit chance. Both rings, despite being uniques, provide us with lucky hit chance for the Ixfelds. And finally, this piece is going to be the Gauntlets of the Ultimate Shadow to turn our Bone Storm into a shadow skill. Here you would want ranks and Blight, shadow damage over time, critical strike chance, And ultimately, lucky hit chance will be better than willpower. I couldn't find these gloves yet. It's so hard to actually find these gloves. And the critical hit chance is also low roll. I need better gloves. The chest is interchangeable. It is soulbound right now for the 20% damage reduction on barrier, which we constantly have due to the shielding storm on the helmet. Together with the 20% damage reduction itself has, plus maximum life, plus lucky hit chance, while barrier. Very interesting. Alternatively, you could take the helmet shielding storm to put that onto your chest with total armor, maximum life, ultimate skill damage, damage reduction. And the helmet you use the Harlequin crest if you have it already. Just in case you wonder, can I use the Harlequin crest? And before you ask in the comments below, is Black River an option? For this build, I'll say no. I tried it against Lilith in comparison to running Lidless Wall. And the Lidless Wall, by being constantly up and especially making multiple Lidless Walls and everything, was just more consistent. Yes, Black River can lead to some millions of crazy crits, but if you're using Black River, you can't use Blight. Then you're going to go back to Reap to make more secure corpses. And I just like the Blight more as a damage source because it's just working so much better, especially with the 15% multiplicative shadow damage you're getting. Now for the Book of the Dead, you can go for bonus shadow damage, especially against bosses. As I'm pushing through dungeons because we have enough damage, I usually just up my resistances. That's while I'm pushing the dungeon, and as soon as I reach the boss, I just go back to the shadow damage. But I'm just too lazy to slot my gems different, and I also use armor gems everywhere to just push my armor up to 11.5, which with the barrier makes me absolutely unkillable. Choose your poison here. If you want to max out your resistances by looking for stats on the helmet and the proper stats on the rings and everything, do that. Be my guest. Skeleton mages get sacrificed for bonus vulnerable damage. And for the golem, we obviously won the critical strike chance. The Paragon board has some interesting choices, and I might bamboozle you with this one. The first glyph is actually Amplify. Yes, Amplify gives us 10% more damage against cursed enemies. That works against bosses and leads everywhere in the dungeon. But the important part is it gives us 114% to all magic nodes, and this goes up to 130% in total, which means that this 50 armor node is 107 armor, double. This 5% damage is 10% damage. So I get another 15% damage and I get another 150 armor plus. And this can go up to 130, 145 if this is fully leveled up to 21. Now we're rushing into the Send of Death board, and here we want especially the critical strike damage bonus, and here on the side too. And we're actually using the Imbiber glyph. Now I did try out the bonus corpse damage glyph with Exhumation, but Imbiber works on everything. So Exhumation, again, only works on your corpse explosion, but Imbiber is more damage while healthy. That means in total, you get 80% bonus damage on whatever you do. Your Bone Storm, Shadow Blight, X-Fells, anything. Bonus damage. And that's where Imbiber is just so much better. Next board is Wither, and here we obviously want everything. The shadow damage, the shadow damage, the damage versus elite, and the shadow damage over time effect. So the shadow damage over time, plus the darkness glyph, and put 55 intelligence. If you can squeeze out another like here, 1, 2, somewhere it wouldn't hurt, but these are the points you can conveniently take without leaning too much out of the window. Now you could swap darkness and amplify, but the problem is that here the shadow resistance is quite useless. Now you could boost the shadow damage obviously, but rather again, why not just boost all damage? Now you're taking the Wither node, and again, look for the maximum of intelligence you can get as you're going through the Paragon board. Maybe you'll find a better path. Also, intelligence on your gear over all stats can be useful because you want the bonus here as high as possible. So your shadow damage over time effects can just do even more bonus damage. Lastly, the Flesh Eater board. And here we want the shadow damage over time glyph with Scourge. And I can pick up 75 intelligence around here to do another 100% shadow damage over time, which also increases the bonus of our Shadow Blight key passive damage because that scales with shadow damage over time. Lastly, we're going into the Bone Graft board, and technically we could also go into the Blood Baguettes, but we'll not make it anyways to the legendary node. Here we're going to pick up maximum life, a bit of armor, maximum life. Yep, very good actually, to be honest. And we'll put on the Essence glyph for the critical strike damage bonus, but also 22% increased critical strike damage multiplicative to enemies that are not healthy on the X-Felds procs. And you're then getting these millions, gazillions, super trillions
of Xfeld's procs. And for the Vampiric Powers, we had Metamorphosis already covered. And you definitely want Prey on the Weak, because that's our source of vulnerable right now, and a multiplicative damage increase that works against bosses even if they're not staggered. Now we do also run Anticipation because it's just too good. Your ultimate skills gain cooldown reduction, nice, but they deal 12% increased damage for each nearby enemy affected by your shadow damage over time effects. And this is actually interesting against bosses too, because bosses always summon minions around them. The Blood Bishop summons these blood orbs. Lilith summons the blood orbs as well. And yes, they do count to increase our damage straight away. And if she goes for cronies or minions in between, yes, that works to do some like absolutely incredible super damage blasts. So Anticipation is just brilliant, especially Dungeoneering flying through. Now, Flowing Veins is an unquestionable choice because 60% increased damage over time effects. Yeah. You don't want to talk about it, right? Now, the final choice is completely open to you, to be honest. We can take Domination, and that is you deal 24% increased damage to enemies who are stunned, immobilized, frozen, or feared. It doesn't work against bosses until they're staggered, but if you actually do stagger a boss, which you do extremely fast due to the double grasping veins you're continuously getting, wouldn't it be better to play Terror? Because Terror gives you guaranteed critical strikes. And if you're actually using this against the boss, and here's also the interesting part, when a boss strikes you and triggers the fear effect, his stagger goes even higher. And now your corpse tendrils, cursing this gets staggered. You saw how fast the boss in the dungeon gets staggered. And then everything crits. And if an Xfeld procs, it will crit 100%. So guaranteed millions of damage, extremely easy as you're just lucky hit procking. Seems like as soon as they're staggered, they just vanish. Now, what can you do to beat bosses in Uber Lilith even easier? We talked about your abilities already, and definitely getting the 2 points in Reaper's Pursuit that you can run away from her fireballs. And also swapping your elemental resistance to make you even more tanky in dungeons back to the shadow damage over time. That was understood and simple. Now, what you could do is you could play the blood-soaked aspect that your blood mist creates desecrated ground below you, because that desecrated ground also has the chance to actually trigger Xfeld's corroded signet. That one would go on your offhand, so you're not using the Lidless wall in a boss fight. But that's just a minimal min-maxing, where I do personally prefer Lidless wall in a boss fight. It's just another source of potentially triggering Xfeld's if you struggle to make more bone storms. Now, alternative on a focus, you could also carry the Shadowblight key passive stacking damage. That your Shadowblight key passive would do another 225% bonus damage, which means that you just get even more passive damage. Again, it's worth it against bosses, but the second to third bone storm is also worth it. So it's kind of like we're trying to squeeze out like another 10-15% damage to make bosses even more simple for you, but you would have to carry a focus with you. End of the day, the build is plenty perfect and working so good. You're looking now for 2 more Sacrilegious Ring builds. Check this video, or if you just want to see the Sacrilegious lands in action, I get this for you covered.